Today we will take and explain Chapter 7, in which we will talk about the quantitative research. Quantitative research is about getting data from questionnaires. We have many ways to conduct questionnaires. We have, for example, these face-to-face methods or telephone interviews. And in this case, the role of the interviewer is very important. In telephone interviews and face-to-face interviews, we need the role of the interviewer. He have many tasks to do. For example, he got to contact sample, get participation in order to increase the response rate, and to administer the interview itself. And because both interviewer and respondents are human beings, so we have this kind of interviewer effect. The interviewer effect because he react to and interact differently with different respondents. On the other hand, the respondents themselves can react differently to different interviewers. Their characteristics may affect the interview, how the interview goes. For example, their age, their gender, their appearance, or even their voice can affect the interviewing process. So we need to minimize or eliminate the interviewer effect. How we can do that? By getting the interviewer trained and briefed. The effects can be minimized via training of the interviewer and have some briefing for the respondents. The interviewer should have several skills, like good interpersonal skills. And also he should have sound knowledge and understanding of data collection and the research process. Also, the responsibilities under Data Protection Act. The first way for administering the questionnaire is the face-to-face interview. These face-to-face interview usually conducted in home or at work, in street, and in central location. However, the time of conducting interviews vary from one place to the other place. For example, if you stop one respondent in the street, you cannot take more than 10 minutes of his time. So, time varies when we have face-to-face interviews from one location to the other location. We have many advantages and disadvantages of face-to-face interviews. Whatever advantages and disadvantages here, you will find in the next slide. Here is the advantages and disadvantages, or we can call them weakness to face-to-face interviews. For example, among the advantages of the face-to-face interviews that it can build a rapport, a relationship between the respondents and the interviewer, making it easier to achieve and maintain cooperation. And this leads to better quality data and a greater response rate. Also, there is some degree of flexibility because the interviewer can explain the questions to the respondents. The length of the interview can be extended, and the interviewer can use stimulus material, مواد تحفيزية. We can offer some gifts or even some money to the respondents. طبعا without interfering about the answers. In face-to-face interviews, we can use complex questions because we have the chance of the interviewer explaining these questions. And we can use extensive probing and prompting. We can use more explanation from the respondents. However, we have several weaknesses. Face-to-face interviewing is relatively expensive and time-consuming, and sometimes it's difficult to find willing respondents. Also, the interruptions from the presence of other members in the household or whatever place we are conducting the interview in. Also, it is difficult to cover remote or rural locations, which is geographically dispersed. Using the cluster sampling to overcome this can introduce sampling bias, تحيز في اختيار العينة, because in this face-to-face interview we have to use cluster sampling, العينة الطبقية. Representativeness affects also in other ways. The interviews may be reluctant to interview in some areas, or even it's difficult to obtain interviews in some areas. Also, potential respondents may be unwilling to open door to complete stranger to answer their questions. Also, the greater tendency to socially desirable response, and the quality control procedures at distance, greater scope of bias or cheating. The second way for administering the questionnaire, we got the first way, which is face-to-face. The second way now is telephone interviews. Telephone interviews usually conducted using specialist telephone units, centers, or the CATI technology with computer-aided technology. Okay, we can use both methods. Usually it takes from 15 to 20 minutes. And it is still commonly used, by the way, the telephone interviews. Can be from 15 to 20 minutes, and it can take longer time if the topic of interest is it is interest to the respondent himself. Also, we have some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantages or the strength of telephone interviews: it could be faster than face-to-face interviews. It is more cost effective. It has a greater degree of anonymity than face-to-face. Anonymity means the respondent is not known, and sometimes the respondent wants to remain anonymous, not known. Telephone interviews is very effective for geographically dispersed sample, and it can be the only way of reaching some population, like for example in business community we cannot meet them face to face, we can use the telephone interviews. And it is pure random sampling approach rather than the clustering sample used in the face to face. We can record the answers to open-ended questions, and we can show these recordings to the clients and the research executive. However, we have some weaknesses. We have weaknesses regarding the access to the sample, and we have weaknesses regarding the interaction with the respondents. Regarding the access to the sample, nowadays fixed lines are not very popular, and we have some implication regarding obtaining a truly random sample. So we have this sampling error and bias because some numbers may be unlisted, and we have this other problems regarding the mobile phones and the telephone answering machines, the call screening, having more than one fixed line, and the internet lines, and the telephone sales. These are the weaknesses regarding the access to the sample. Regarding the interaction with the respondents, we have some social interaction in the face-to-face interviews which is lost in telephone interviews. That's why it is harder to build rapport or build a relationship with the respondents. Harder for the interview to encourage the respondents to take part. They simply can hang up or refuse the interview. And difficult to use the stimulus material we used in the face-to-face interview. It is hard to use it in the telephone interview. Also, difficulties with long and complex questions. Now we come to the third method for administering the questionnaire, which is the self-completion. Self-completion means the respondent he completes the questionnaire himself without the need for the interviewer. The self-completion method can be used as a standalone or as a part of personal interview. It is used to reach hard to get population and widely dispersed population, and usually to collect data on sensitive topics. And this self-completion is not when not necessary to have an interviewer to ask questions. So we eliminate the role of interviewer because it's not necessary. Self-completion methods is effective when the topic is relevant and of interest to target population, and is also suitable for reaching the target and achieving a response. As usual, we have advantages and disadvantages of self-completion methods. Among the advantages, it's very easy to set up and manage. Cost effective because there is no interviewer role. Suitable for reaching widely dispersed population. The web and the mail survey offer advantages that come with electronic data capture. Also, in self-completion, we are free from interviewer bias or error and reduce risk of socially desirable bias. By the way, what are these bias? These bias, when we have an interviewing and ask you questions, you may reply with favorable answers بإجابات ترضي الانترفيور، لكن ما هيش إجابات صحيحة. They are not correct answers. However, they are desirable answers. And also, these self-completion methods are effective if questions need time for consideration or involve checking documents. So it's not we have to answer right away. We may take a little bit of time to answer. So self-completion is suitable in this case. And also we can ask questions on sensitive topics. Also we have some disadvantages. Reliant on the availability, the self-completion methods are reliant on availability of relevant and up-to-date sampling frame. And sometimes the sampling frame is not up-to-date. The sample itself is self-selecting. So we have bias here. Response rate may vary and can be very poor, and this affects the representativeness and the validity of the response. Cost per completed interview may be high, and lack of control related to the data quality. Respondents may not ask all questions, so at the end we have to eliminate his response. Respondents may not interpret questions correctly because he's self-completing. No interviewer to explain. Cannot probe or clarify answers. Not good for getting detailed at open questions. It is self-completed. Not good at complicating questions and instructions. Again, no interviewer role to explain. مفيش حد يشرح له لو في complex questions. Not good for questions requiring spontaneous answers. ساعات بنسأل أسئلة بنحتاج spontaneous، حاجة كده عفوية، لكن دي self completion بيفكر مرة واثنين وثلاثة. فلما بنسأل أسئلة محتاجة إجابة عفوية السلف completion ما تنفعش معاها. Cannot use funneling technique. الفانلينج technique اللي هي beginning with large questions to small and specific questions. Cannot observe either body language or the tone of voice, and sometimes the body language and tone of voice is very important to notice in some questions. How we can improve the response rate in the self-completion questionnaires and mail methods. We can increase the response rate through different ways. First of all, through the if the topic of interest is relevant to the sample, and we have questionnaire well designed, when we have a good introduction and well briefed trained interviews عندهم توجيهات وعندهم تدريب كويس, when we have incentives and reminders and the pre-notification to guarantee customer acceptance, and through postal and email questionnaires when we have pre-notification, covering letter, sponsorships, and reminders. The internet as self-completion methods, we have several issues or problems associated with such methods. For example, the suitability of method for topic. Sometimes it's not suitable for internet as self-completion methods. Also, we have the issue of the representativeness of the sample regarding the sampling frame, the response rate, and the non-response bias. The data quality, the technical concerns, for example, the firewalls and the phone access or the internet speed, and also the design and the layout of the survey. We have here an example of web survey. We have here SurveyMonkey, or sometimes nowadays we have the Google Forms. These are examples of some facilities that allow us to create the survey, copy the link, and send it to the respondents so they can access the survey online, fill the survey, and submit their responses. We have in this web surveys, we have sometimes traffic intercepted on websites such as banners and ads. We have the traditional methods and emails. We can send the link via email. We have the sample directed to specially created web address. We have some kind of password for access. And sometimes these surveys take about 15 to 20 minutes. And by the way, these questionnaires should be very easy to follow and easy to fill in because it is self-completed. We can send the survey through emails, via web, email, or traditional routes. Questionnaires are sent to the respondent's email address. It could be embedded or attached in the email. We prefer to have a pre-notification to avoid the rejection. Also, we can use a covering letter or email. Also, it takes about 15 minutes, and also it should be easy and look good to fill in. We have another way of getting data which is called panel research. Panel research are used to collect longitudinal data from representative population. A group of population, a group of individual or household are asked repeated questions over time. We can use on continuous basis, maybe daily or through regular intervals. And this panel research or questions are used to answer questions like what, where, how much, how many, how long, where. They can monitor, as we said, in continuous basis or regular interval, either in short term or in long term. In short term, for example, if we are asking about the reaction to prices, price changes or promotions, or in long term, if we asking about brand share. It can use for ad hoc issues, مرة واحدة, research for ad hoc for only one time. For example, if we are asking about effect of an ad campaign. We have several ways of maintenance to panels. We agreed that the panels are a group of people or individuals are interviewed or asked questions over time. Okay, what happened if those people or some of these people drop out, or what if the population change? We need to recruit new members to maintain this panel. However, new members may behave differently, and this could be source of error. But what we have to do is to replace them. However, the sample selected should be representative. To prevent attrition, we should provide some incentives and a newsletter. We have different use of panels. We have consumer panels and retail panel. The consumer panel, panel is any group of individuals or population. So we have this population or individual comprised of consumers. It could be household, motorists, older people, and we can ask them about market characteristics and brand share or media usage. The other use of panel is a retail panel that is comprised of retail outlets or shops, and we can ask them about the stock held or the out of stocks, brand coverage, or even the distribution and sales patterns. Also, we have the online panels. Any online methods, of course, it is very cost effective and it's a very effective way of achieving representative sample. Also, it works in some ways as traditional panels. The poor recruited via internet or via traditional methods, and it's very important to build and maintain the community to have the constant response rate and to maintain such panel. How we can choose the way to administer the questionnaire. We have already explained various ways of explaining or administering the questionnaire. We explained the face-to-face questionnaire, telephone questionnaire, panel research, online questionnaire, or even the self-completion. Or you as a researcher, how you can identify or choose the way you administer your own questionnaire. This actually depends on several factors. For example, the factor of the study itself and its objective. It specify which better way we can interview our respondents. Also, the issue under investigation, the accessibility of the sample and their geographical dispersion, and also the time and the budget available for the research. All these are factors. We must decide upon which these factors in order to decide upon which the way we can administer our questionnaire. We have come to the summary. We have taken in this chapter the main methods of having the quantitative research questionnaire through interviewing, face-to-face, telephone, or even self-completion via postal or web or email, and also how we can choose the method, the best method for our research. We can decide upon the purpose, the topic, and the population of interest. By reaching this topic, we have reached the end of our lecture today. Hope to